Hello and welcome everyone. This is a new video of the events of A Tale of Two Cities by Charles Dickens for Prep 3 with Miss Walaa Samir. Let's start. Chapter 3 is entitled The Wine Shop, and this is one of the most important chapters in the whole novel. Based on the novel's title, today we're talking about the first city, which is Paris. And the people in Saint Antoine Street were very poor. They led a life of suffering and misery. The streets were dirty there. They never tasted anything but black bread and death. They never tasted anything but black bread, which means that they almost had no food. And death is because of their poverty, their inability to lead a good life. A cask of wine was broken, and people were in disorder. The cask of wine is a barrel-shaped container that holds wine or other, usually alcoholic beverages. When the cask of wine dropped and broken in the street, the wine was red and stained the narrow streets. All people left what they were doing and rushed like wild animals to have free drops of wine that was mixed with mud. They even knelt down to drink the muddy wine by every means. They used the cups, scarves, and their hands to drink it, and this shows us how poor they were living. There is a significance of the cask of wine scene. Charles Dickens intended to put this scene for some reasons, and the reasons here are: this scene showed the hunger, the poverty, and the ignorance of those people. Can you imagine yourself kneeling on the ground to drink some wine by your hands? And this wine is mixed with mud? Those people lived extreme poverty. The description of the red wine filling the streets and staining the hands and feet of people foreshadows the day when the streets and hands and feet will be stained by the aristocratic's blood after the revolution. Gaspard, who is one of the Jacks, wrote the word blood on the wall. The Jacks are the revolutionaries who organized and implemented the French Revolution. As for Gaspard, he was one of the people who gathered at the cask of wine scene. He dipped his fingers in the muddy wine and wrote the word blood on the wall, because he believed that the revolution would break out and the blood would flow like wine in the streets. When Defarge saw him, and Defarge was the servant of Dr. Manit in the past, he is working as the keeper of the wine shop. When Defarge saw Gaspard doing that, he called him mad and got a handful of mud to clean it. He covered the word blood by a handful of mud. He did so because if the nobles knew that the people in Saint Antoine were preparing for the revolution, they would kill them or put them in prison. At the meantime, Mr. Laurie and Lucy came from England to restore Dr. Manit after his long imprisonment. But Defarge let some people look at Dr. Manit through the door and watch him. Mr. Laurie wondered and asked Defarge about that. Defarge meant to fill their hearts with hatred against the Marquis to prepare them for the revolution. Those people who were watching Dr. Manit through the keyhole were some of the Jacks, and Defarge was one of the Jacks too, and he wanted to fill their hearts against the Marquis with hatred, so as to, when the revolution is broken out, they will kill furiously. Mr. Laurie was surprised because of many reasons concerning Dr. Manit. He noticed that Monsieur Defarge locked Dr. Manit in his room. He didn't let the door open. He locked it with a key. Defarge told Mr. Laurie that was for the doctor's good, because he used to be locked for many years, that he would be frightened, or he could tear himself into pieces, or even he could go mad if the door was left open, as Dr. Manit used to obey rules through all those years of his long imprisonment. Dr. Manit was greatly changed. He was a wreck of a man. He suffered mentally and physically. He couldn't know himself, or his name, or remember his old friend, Mr. Laurie, or know his old servant, Defarge, or even recognize his daughter, Lucy. He lost his memory. He thought his name was 105 North Tower when Mr. Laurie tried to ask him, "Don't you remember an old friend of yours? Don't you remember your name?" He answered him saying that, "My name is 105 North Tower, and this was the cell where Dr. Manit was imprisoned, and the North Tower was the place where he was locked in." He told them that he was a shoemaker. He couldn't remember that he was a doctor, and through all those years he used to make shoes, and he was working on one of them when they met him for the first time, and he was so busy finishing the shoe in his hands that he even didn't look at their faces while they were talking to him. He used to be locked up and obey orders, and we mentioned that before. He thought he was still in prison. He didn't recognize that he was now set free. His voice was weak and faint. Lucy found out that her father was still alive. When she saw him for the first time, she was afraid and trembling, and Mr. Laurie told her that truth at the door of his room, so she wouldn't have any choice but to go inside and meet him. He couldn't identify her. Mr. Laurie encouraged her and tried to comfort her. She decided to take her father out of Paris as it was dangerous for him. Defarge hired a carriage to take them to the port, and Mr. Laurie prepared Manit's papers. Manit now is going back to London. They took him to the carriage, and before leaving, he insisted on taking the shoemaking tools with him on the ship, or else he wouldn't go with them. Monsieur Defarge went upstairs and got them to him to comfort him and to let the carriage move to the port as soon as possible. And that was the end of the events of chapter 3. We have here some of the most important questions in this chapter. What kind of life did people in Saint Antoine Street live? Why was Mr. Laurie surprised at the top floor? What did Gaspar do on the wall? What was Defarge's reaction, and why? What's the significance of the split wine and the word blood? Describe the scene of the cask of wine. How did Dr. Manit's long imprisonment affect his behavior? Thank you so much for being here, waiting to hear your answers and comments in the comment section. Hope to see you soon in chapter 4. Bye!